Well, Pam, you are back on the field. How it feels that?
It feels good. It feels different because I have a little bit more, I'm a little more worried now, I think, with the baby. If I fall off or I get hurt, what do I do? So it's kind of a mix of emotions. It's kind of a mix of nervousness with excitement and I guess a little bit of pride. I'm happy to be back on the back of a horse. It's my happy place. It's where I've been kind of striving to be. So overall, it feels good.
You're in Argentina. You came with Luis, with the baby. Now you are with your friends here playing, having fun. You stopped a few weeks ago because of your back. Today, how are you? Your body.
It's okay. Honestly, I think after having the baby, I had some complications, so I couldn't ride or work out or do anything for a while. And when I came to Argentina, I was really eager to get back in the saddle, and I think I pushed it a little bit too much. I think I went too hard, too fast, and I pulled my back really bad. I met with 5 different physios, a chiropractor, you name it, and I guess what they told me is I dislocated a few ribs. So they put the ribs back in place, but there was still kind of a healing process after that, and it's been really, really painful to even get on the back of a horse. So I kind of sort of played 2 tournaments. I played 1 or 2 chukkers in each game, and then I sat and I just took the last 2 weeks off. No riding, no nothing. Up until about 2 days ago, I jumped in on a practice, and I played a couple chukkers and I felt okay. So now I feel okay now. I feel a little bit of pain, but not bad, and I'm just taking it slow. So I'm doing what I probably should have done. I'm riding every other day, doing 1 or 2 chukkers, really not pushing it, but doing my best to kind of take it slow and giving myself a little bit of time and grace to get back to where I need to be.
Because I guess the goal is 2025, the US Open Women's. Let's go back to the last season in the States. You spoke about the technologies and also, you were playing most of the games at Port Mayaca. We have some news about that. Maybe you want to explain that?
Yeah, so we had a couple of initiatives last year to kind of put forth to the Women's Committee and to the USPA. One of the goals was to start building out a Triple Crown format for the women. And what that would entail was kind of a 3-tournament series similar to what the men have, similar to the Gauntlet. In order to do so, we already had the Women's US Open. We had to kind of create and solidify that second leg and introduce a third leg. What we were able to do is there's always been kind of this warm-up tournament for the US Open that Port Mayaca has always been gracious to host. And it's kind of changed names over the years. It was Tababooey and then Shady Lady, but it never really had a lot of power, prominence. And now what we were able to do is we solidified that name as the Women's Gold Cup. So similar to the men, the women now have a Gold Cup and a US Open. So we have those 2 legs now solidified, whereas previously it was just the US Open and the warm-up tournament, the pre-open. So we were able to get that done, which is really exciting. And Port Mayaca will be graciously hosting the Gold Cup. So it'll be wonderful to be able to have that leading up to the Open to start kind of building out this women's season that we discussed. We still haven't created that first leg, and that's something that I think we'll work on this year, is figuring out who's hosting it, how it works, what time of year. I think the complicated thing right now for this season is that the Women's Open and the Women's Gold Cup happened so early. It's happening in January this year, with the Women's US Open final happening February 9th, which historically is a lot earlier than what it has been in the past. I think we'll probably see that that's too early for the women. So I think next year's objectives would be pushing that back a little bit and incorporating a first leg similar to the C.B. Whitney, but maybe having something like the Sunny Hale Memorial or somehow working that into the Triple Crown, into the series. So we have one initiative done. We have the Gold Cup, that's amazing, and thank you to Port Mayaca for hosting that, and the USPA and the Women's Committee for making that come to fruition. That was a big one for us.
The other good news is we will show more games at the prestigious NPC, National Polo Center, right?
Yes, so the other initiative that we worked on was getting more of the US Open games at NPC. Previously, most of them, all of them actually, were at Port Mayaca, and then just the final was at NPC, Sunday Field 1, which is something that we accomplished years back and was really important for us. What we want to do is try to get more of those games in Wellington proper. So get those US Open games to happen in Wellington and keep the Gold Cup in Port Mayaca. We were able to do that this year, so not all of the games will be there, but the semifinals, the really important games, will be at NPC, and the final will remain on Field 1.
Which are the advantages of that?
The advantages at playing at NPC is their fields are incredible. So they do a really, really good job of maintaining the fields, and I think, in my opinion, it'll allow the girls to open up a little bit more. So for those really important games, it'll kind of make it more interesting, a little bit more fair. And additionally, we'll be able to have the technology that we need to be able to review plays, to have the playback, to be able to have the reviews that we didn't have previously. We had a lot of technical difficulties last year, which resulted with some unfortunate things, and it's something that we need to avoid in a tournament that's so prestigious. So with the semifinals happening at NPC, we'll be able to have all of the technology that the best tournaments in the world have access to. We'll be able to have wonderful fields, and we'll be able to be close. So it's not a big trip for the horses or the players. It's right in everyone's backyard, and hopefully we'll be able to get a good crowd.
The technology is another tool for the umpire, for example, to help them also.
Exactly. So the umpires will have access, they'll have good connection, they'll be able to review. The umpires will be able to do what they should be able to do for such an important game. So in getting all of this done, these initiatives, it was really important to have the Women's Committee involved. Megan Gracita is the chair of the Women's Committee, and Kayla Dowd actually in the USPA and Carluccio Ariano are the ones who really pushed to make this happen. So it wouldn't have happened without their help. They were the ones who really got this done. What I learned about this sport after becoming a mother is that it's not easy. It's not easy to do both. And fortunately, I'm in a position where this is, in a lot of ways, a hobby for me. It's not so much a profession. I have my career and then I have this, but I do treat it in a lot of ways like a profession. And it's really difficult to have a baby and come back to the sport. And I've realized that, and I've experienced it now. And since I've gone through this process, and I've been made aware of how challenging it actually is for these women who are actual professionals, the Hope Ariano, the Hazel Jacksons, all of the top girls in the world, I wanted to do something that would kind of help them want to be mothers, become mothers, and be able to perform and have the same opportunities that they had prior to that. I don't think you should have anything taken away from you if you choose to be a mother. And if you're a professional athlete in this sport, that can be difficult. You have to sacrifice your time, your body, everything to be able to do that. And it's the most wonderful thing in the world to have a child. But I want these women to be able to have the opportunity to create their families without taking a step back in their profession. And taking a step back meaning losing opportunities because they took a year off or maybe more than a year in order to provide for their little baby, to have a baby. It's a lot to ask of a woman. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to work with the USPA to create a new rule, a new mother's rule or a mom rule, so that the women who have babies, who take significant amount of time off to carry a child, give birth to a child, and then care for that child after the birth, they have the option to lower their handicap by 1 goal. I went through this myself, and that's why I know how difficult it is. There is no way that I had to go through what I went through and I'm able to play the same that I played prior to having the baby. It's just impossible. You need time, you need grace, you need practice, you need opportunities, you need tournaments. And a lot of these girls that are professionals, I don't want them to lose out on that. So with this new mother rule, the women can elect to have their handicap lowered by 1 goal, which would then allow them to have more opportunities for tournaments. If you take 1 goal off of the best players in the world, they will be picked up in a second. But if they stay at their same handicap, take a year off, and then try to scramble to find a job, it's going to be difficult because it's going to be hard for them to get back to where they were without having the time and grace to be able to do that. I don't want it to be an automatic change because I don't want to take away from these girls who think that they can and will play at the same level. If they want to stay where they are, they can do that. I just want it to be an option. I want to give them grace. I want to give them time. I want them to be able to have babies and still have the same opportunities they had prior to having that baby.
And you can take it or not.
Exactly. You can take it or not. It's totally their decision. It's at their discretion, but the option should exist. I think if there's been any pushback for this rule, or if there's what kind of made me want to have this rule, is that there's really been a lot of inequity in how these situations have been handled in the past. That's something that I experienced directly, is these women, of course, have been playing polo for a long time now. They've had babies and come back to the sport. And how their individual situations have been handled is kind of at the discretion of a very small amount of people. And I don't think that they should be the ones that are the decision makers in this process. I think the women that have the children should be the ones to be able to make the decision as to whether or not they want to come back playing at their same handicap or given the opportunity to go down one to have time to get back. It's the inequity that I saw in the way that this was handled that made me want to make this an option for girls who decide to do this in the future. There hasn't been any pushback so far. I'm sure there will be. Some people did compare it to an injury and they wanted it to be handled the same way as the injury rule was handled. But I would argue now having an injury and having a baby that having a baby and having a broken arm are two very, very different things. Yeah. I mean, I could go on for a long time explaining the differences, but I'll digress. But it's very different. So I think that there should be a special carve out for this specific situation for the women. And I don't think it's comparable to an injury at all. I think it's a very different situation.
Did you have any feedback from any players, or did you talk with any players?
Yeah, I spoke to a lot of players. I spoke to a lot of the high goal players, and a lot of them were on board with this. A lot of them agree with it. Because again, it's not automatic. If you're 10 goals and you want to stay 10 goals, you have that option. But if you want to have more opportunities and be given a season to play, maybe not at your best, you have that option too. So it would be more of an option than an automatic change. And a lot of the girls were really in favor of it. I haven't had any of the girls come to me and say that that's not something that they would support.
It can be a rule to keep developing the sport.
Exactly. And it can encourage mothers who are kind of contemplating about, when do I have a baby? How is it going to affect my career? It gives them a little bit comfort knowing that they can still come back and have the same opportunities they had prior to starting a family.